Thanks for joining me again today. I had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Lance Porter at the Manship School of Mass Communication about how a brand can help you build a strategy for your business. He gave some really great insight, and I'd like to share that with you today. So let's take a look.
Well, I am chair of the Digital Media Initiative here in the Manship School, and I've been doing digital media from a branding perspective since '95 or so, and have been kind of in the marketing branding business for 20 years now. I came to LSU from Disney, where I was the executive director of digital marketing for their film division before coming here. I have a PhD in mass comm with an emphasis in new media from the University of Georgia. And so I sort of live with brands all the time. I think that you really, for most businesses, especially consumer-based businesses, you don't really have a business unless you have a brand, because you have to have something that distinguishes you from your competitors, and also something that allows people to remember who you are and what you stand for. And so I would always start with the brand to decide what it is that we stand for, how are we going to position ourselves against the other brands that are out there in our marketplace. And so in that way, it sort of gives businesses a way to think about from the very beginning, what is it that they want to accomplish as a business, and how does their brand represent that. If you look at it from a marketing perspective, obviously you've heard the four P's, product, price, place, and promotion. And so the brand is really the promotion part of things. You can break it down to uh, visual components of what the brand is, and then what are the contents of that, or what is the brand supposed to represent. If you think about brands from a historical perspective, it literally used to be a brand, and so it was all visual at that point. Nowadays, brands are so much more interactive, and so one of the things that you have to do in today's environment is you have to think about the content of your brand, but also how are people going to interact with that, and how is that going to be represented in media? That means letting go of control of a brand in some ways, and it also, from a consumer perspective, means that hopefully we'll get a lot more real and transparent brands out there that actually do what they say and represent real things. We're undergoing one of the largest business transformations in history right now. And a lot of that has to do with interactivity and audiences being able to respond to things. And so um, once your brand goes out into the world, it starts to be shaped by consumers as well. That's always been true, but now more than ever, brands actually have to they're accountable to consumers, because consumers can say anything to anyone about them instantly on a large scale. I think that the reality of the brand is what's important. It has to be real at this point. And so, even from a small business perspective, there's plenty of things out there that are allowing people to really shape your brand in a digital context. And so, um, I wouldn't say it's all visual, because there's plenty of companies that manage to have a very understated visual presence and still have a very powerful brand. To me, it's what the brand stands for, and it has to be a real representation. If the brand's not accurate to what it's portraying, then you've lost. And so I think about it from a content perspective, that it has to be real content. So authenticity is what's key here. I would say don't be afraid to start exploring some of the things that are out there that are free. For instance, WordPress or Tumblr or some of those kind of things to represent yourself digitally. That's a good place to start, because when you start thinking about how you're going to be represented there, it forces you to break it down to its bare minimum at that point. And there are lots of templates that look really good and look professional that you don't have to be a designer to be able to do. So um, that's where, obviously, I'm a digital person, so I would say that that's a good place to start. Once you start there, then you start to figure out what the questions that you have are, and when your business will push um, the direction that you need to go, then you start to realize what your own limitations are, and what you need help on. But there's a couple of things going on. Technology is kind of making things easier from that perspective to represent ourselves, for better or worse. It's driving costs down, and it's making it less of a technical function and more something that you can accomplish with some relatively inexpensive software. I would start with who your audience is, um, and thinking about who are your consumers, what are the ways that they use, what are the places that they are, how do they interact with your product? Is there a way to put your product or your brand in that place in a relevant way? When you think about outlets, you have to think from a consumer perspective how you can enable them in some way. Where are they seeking you out, kind of thing. Right message. So um, I always would think about it from, you figure out what your message is going to be in the beginning. You think about your audience and your competition and how you need to position yourself. There's a lot of different ways to think about it. You can think about, well, does my competitor have do they have a so-called share of voice in that particular outlet? If they're buying a lot in that particular outlet, maybe I should try something else where they're not. So positioning has a lot to do with it, um, and obviously budget. So I think a lot of small business owners obviously are dealing with budget constraints, um, and they're afraid to take risks or afraid to spend um, on branding type things. Um, the mindset needs to be that it's an investment in who you are and establishing yourself among consumers. It can't just be an expense. Instinctively, I think that you have to have some elements of the old brand there. You can't just chuck everything, because um, then you've built up all of this goodwill, and you've moved people down the purchase funnel. They're aware of who you are. You don't want to have to start over from ground zero there. So um, what you have to do is take a good hard look at yourself, and that might be one of those times when you need to have someone else help you, because you need an independent perspective on what works for you and what doesn't. And then you take those pieces that are working for you and you build from there, to try to put together some new brand, but that has the good elements of the old brand. One thing that small businesses should be thinking about, no matter what is the impact of mobile, and how is mobile going to affect my business? Because that is truly the fastest growing technology in history. It's changing everything. It's changing how people communicate with each other, but also how they get information about products. So you should be thinking about, how does my product relate to something like that, and the whole Internet of Things, because pretty soon most consumer products are going to have some kind of a chip or barcode or something that makes your product part of the overall network.